Hello and welcome to readreddit by FactFinder, r/AskReddit. Today's question is, teachers of Reddit, what is the weirdest excuse you've ever heard that turned out to be true? We had a kid in our class who was pure chaos. Came late all the time, forgot stuff, didn't do his homework, disruptive in class. You get the picture. One day he came to school over 2 hours late and said the bus he was on fell into a sinkhole. Everybody was like, yeah, right. Until the news came in that there had indeed been a sinkhole from a tunnel construction and that indeed a bus had slipped into it. We never found out whether our classmate had actually been in it, but he swore he was. That their homework had been confiscated by Colonel Gaddafi's police. Turns out the kid's father worked for a Libyan bank, and the homework was about aerosols. Kid had gone to visit him during the summer break, and it was taken by the border guards. Muammar Gaddafi ate my homework. That's why they called him the mad dog of the Middle East. I had a 6th grader come into class very sleepy during test day. I asked her why and she said she is sleeping next to her dead grandma in the living room and has been too scared to sleep. I asked her parents about this. Turns out it's a cultural practice of theirs to keep a dead relative in the home for a few days while their spirit makes its journey to the afterlife. To answer some of your questions, she was from a large Hmong family that lived in a small apartment. She also mentioned before the grandmother passed her family attached bells to the grandmother's clothing to scare away the spirits that were making her sick. Me, the teacher, didn't make cookies for the last day of school before finals as promised because a car drove into my house and they cut off my gas line to check for leaks. I pulled up the local news article as evidence. A teacher at our school promised to make cookies the last day of school, but his baby was born the night before. That was freshman year. It is senior year now, and the teacher still gets asked about the cookies. That basically sums up teaching high schoolers. We never forget, especially if food movies or a fun field trip is involved. My pet rats dragged my history homework into their cage and modified it to fit in with the aesthetic of their shredded paper nest. I told the teacher the next day, who didn't believe me until I could get my dad to vouch for me. Teach was all well if she wasn't lying. Why didn't she bring the remainder in as proof, my dad? Because the papers were shredded and covered in rat urine. I've had a few. I'll be 2 weeks late for class because I'll be in Beijing at the Olympics. My father was murdered. I was deported last night. Funny story about the last excuse. One day, this great guy in my PE class completely disappears for like half the year. Nobody could reach him. He wasn't responding to any phones, messages, DMs, etc. And part of his family was gone too. Even the teachers were puzzled and worried. So he comes back some time later and we all joke around about how he was deported. Well, turns out he actually did get deported. For some reason, they mistook his family for illegal immigrants and detained them for a month. Then sent them to the Dominican. His family was half Puerto Rican, half Mexican, so it made no sense why they were sent to the doctor. And at the very least, he himself was also a US citizen. His family filed to go back to the USA immediately. I was a student. It was the first day of school. There were 6 of us who were late. The reason? The school bus stop was moved to a new location. We all piled into my mother's car. We went to the principal's office. The office manager said notice letters were sent to us. So she checked her log. The notices were never sent out. See, it says right here the notices were sent out on date pending. My bio teacher told me this story. During a biology lesson they were outside. My school is near a small lake. A student ended up falling in and getting their legs stuck in the mud. The bio teacher had to rescue them and hose them off behind the school. The next period teacher didn't believe them despite the student being soaking wet. I didn't come to school because I was in Mexico at my hypnotist. Yeah, didn't think one would take a day trip to Mexico for a hypnotist and be back the next day, but that was in fact what had happened. One of the girls I know from uni works in a college. Here college is a name for vocational school, and one of her groups of students jokingly said they died when someone was absent from classes. So one day it went morbidly wrong when she asked why. Say, Dave was absent. The group replied that he died. She laughed and said okay, but seriously, and the class was just silent. Edit. For additional clarity. Yes, it turned out that Dave was dead. For real this time. Very dead. I gave this one. I was in college. I went back to my house between classes only to find my roommates barricaded inside by police. Why? You might ask. There was a bull moose in our side yard and the fish and game people were very concerned. So my lab isn't until 3 or something. And meanwhile there's like 8 officers having a standoff with a moose in my yard. This continues until someone decides that the moose is an imminent threat and they are going to try to tranquilize it. So they try that and it fails. So now they are going to kill the moose. It gets to be about 2:45 and I need to leave for my class, and I'm summarily informed by the armed officer that my lawn is not safe and I'm to stay inside. So I emailed my prof and was like, look, I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm barricaded in my house and they won't let me leave. I assume this will be on the news tonight. Turns out it was on the news. They interviewed me, and I got an exemption on that lab. He told me later that he was going to 100% fail me because it was the worst excuse ever until he saw the news story, in case it wasn't immediately obvious. Yes. This occurred in Vermont. Because where else would this be a problem? Canada is where else it could be a problem. But damn. Just. Damn. Yes. Canada it could be a problem. But the difference is the Canadian prof would be like, well, you know, that kinda stuff happens. Bears too. I remember being late for something because of a bear in the driveway. North Van. And the prof just said no worries. Bears happen. As a graduate for undergrad students, I was teaching an online course and all assignments had to be submitted by midnight. A student emailed me, "This is important," and said her internet was down and she couldn't submit the paper. As in logged into her email on the internet to email me that her internet was down. The way the class was run, if she didn't submit the paper by midnight she got a 0 for the assignment. I replied to her email, "Remember, her internet is down. That if she brought me a hard copy of the paper she could still get her grade." She shows up at my apartment 10 minutes later. I hosted study groups in the community room, with her hard copy paper and a half-melted internet router. She had emailed me from her smartphone that she had for her internship. This was early in the smartphone surge and few people had them. Girl got her grade and we're still in touch. She proved herself to be an incredibly dedicated student and is now in graduate school herself. Not me but a friend. Substitute teaching for a day. Walks into class, "Hi, I am your teacher for the day. I am told you have homework, can you hand it in now please?" Student raises hand, "I don't have my homework, teacher." "And why's that?" Student, "We weren't given homework, teacher." "Oh yes you were." Student note, teacher gets angry about how she knows they were given homework and just because she was a new teacher didn't mean that they can walk over her. Different teacher walks in. Turned out the sub-teacher was in the wrong classroom. I was the student. My grandparents were driving me to school and my neighbor's cow got out of their field, completely blocking the road. Because cows are stubborn and it took us forever to help my neighbor get the cow back in. I was late. Knowing my teacher was a dick, my grandma came down to the class with me to let him know what happened. He didn't believe her. I still can't wrap my head around a teacher at a school in a small farming town didn't believe I was late because a cow was blocking the road. Cows are fake moose. Similar and relevant. In 8th grade earth science I had a group project. My team was supposed to measure temperature changes based on altitude. We used a few helium balloons and I think like 50 yards of twine. We did this at my house. A farmhouse where we shared the back 20 acres with our neighbor, who had quite the herd of cattle, in exchange for goods. Anyways, we kept our notes on a folding table out there with some paperweights. And on the last checkup on the experiment my mom noticed the cows gathered around our project. We rushed out there to shoo them away but Alice we were too late. The cows ran off and we checked our paper. And the cows ate a massive chunk out of my notepad. All of the data was gone. The due date was tomorrow. Luckily the teacher let us do it again because we had proof of what happened. I have photos and stuff if anyone cares I can track them down. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more Reddit content.